I do think it is good practice to get out in the world and do something. So here we are. Here we are, and something brought us onto Facebook and YouTube today. I want to say good morning to everybody, and this is a very special presentation of the talent show. Very happy to introduce everybody to my good friend Bob Alba, entrepreneur, inventor, maybe more appropriately, father, husband, brother, friend, fellow human being of planet Earth. Bob, why don't you introduce yourself? I'm glad to have you on the show. Thanks for making the time this morning. Tell us about your talent and maybe kind of run us up to what brought you here today. How'd you get here?
Okay, Joe. Well, thanks for having me on your show and the very kind introduction. And I would say, of course, meeting Joe, it was, what was it? It's over music on Cinco de Mayo.
Yeah.
Da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Probably 12 years ago, 13 years ago, right?
Yeah, yeah. And, well, let's see. You asked about my talent. After all, it's a talent show. People start out, I think our talents show up normally when we're younger. And I have an interesting family, one of 8 kids, 5 boys, 3 girls. And boys, I'm the second oldest boy, elder sister. And we had lots of jobs. And the first job is keeping the house tidy and fixed up. My dad could fix anything, and I had his talent. Worked with him doing all kinds of things. He had me crawling in the ceiling, stuffing in insulation in a big house we lived in when, I'm like 10 years old, fooling around with electrical wires, getting electrocuted every now and then, wake you up. But we learned a lot. And all of my brothers and sisters in one way or another have been, reflecting mom and dad's skills and talents. And whether it was in medicine or engineering or something of this nature, that led to my own. I was a bit of a renegade, but I could fix stuff. Fixing stuff meant one thing or another. My mom got me into repairing electric wheelchairs and respiratory equipment. I didn't have the patience to be a good student. And so left college after not really investing the energy and bio pre-med and all of that like you need to do. Older brother did it. My elder sister became a nurse practitioner, all of that. Me, I was going to fix stuff. Well, before I knew it, I was repairing people's sophisticated electric wheelchairs and then respirators and people who had polio and lived in iron lungs and rocking beds and other devices to help them breathe. And the folks I met, just like you or me, wanted their independence, wanted to be able to get around. They'd show me what they could do with their hands, which was often not even be able to lift them up like this. But whatever little bit they could use, I essentially, after investing time and energy in life, I figured out what to do with their stuff. So I adapted their vehicles, their wheelchairs, made tie-down systems and tiny little steering wheels, 5 inches in diameter, that you could turn with a feather. And they learned to drive, and that went on for 20, 30 years.
So tell me about the
handicapped drivers.
Yeah, tell me about the beginning real quick, because I wasn't aware before that you started with your mom introducing you to solve some problems. Maybe paint a picture of one of those moments. That's interesting. How old were you? What was the year?
The moment before is all the epiphanies that come out after you move out of your home.
Okay.
All right. So my dad figured anything I wanted to do with fixing stuff was wasting my life, because if you didn't become a doctor, you had the guts or whatever, the brains to do it, you were wasting your life.
Okay.
So that was my impetus to leave home and do my own thing, which is very American, and lots of cultures have that kind of thing. You rebel against the old man. And so my rebellion was wanting to fix diesel trucks up in Vermont or something and go skiing.
Okay.
That would be great. But that was, I also had the other things that your parents instill in you. Do good, help people, all of that. Be a good whatever your religion was. It was raised Catholic. My mom had been Lutheran. Dad was Italian, so his parents were Catholic. So basically raised Catholic, but always encouraged to be open to any religion, including going to shul with Jewish friends from Brooklyn. And anyway, there wasn't a lot of that, but all of that good stuff led to having a built-in philosophy of helping people is good. So my talent of fixing stuff naturally got expressed in helping very severely disabled people be able to drive. And
how old were you when that happened? How old were you when you, like, for you the image in my mind is when you held up your hand, and maybe to bring people up to speed of the image in my head, because I have some history with you. You're dealing with people that were maybe it's cerebral palsy or just a severe neurological disability where they can't really move, but just the slightest bit, right? And you give them the ability, from some of the things I've seen, and there's a lot more than that, to manipulate a vehicle. And you said with a feather's touch, really just with the slightest ability to move their hand, they can operate a vehicle. I've seen video, and somebody's lived the life of having no arms or the ability not to use their arms and driving a motorcycle, right? I mean, you kind of just started, right? The motorcycle, was recent. That was later. Recent.
I'll get it to
so
that
take
one
me
later.
back. So I'm curious at like the beginning, right? Because you said your talents emerged, you could fix things, but like getting into, you said iron lung and respirators, right? This is heavy stuff. Like I'm just curious, was there like something that happened? Like there a moment where that kind of stood out to you that this is serious stuff? I'm not just serving, but this is probably a little different than that. We're actually changing people's lives, right? It's not just service for service. I'm actually, these are medical equipment that they need to breathe, that they need to, get around in their daily lives.
Well, I'm technically oriented, so I like to be precise. So with a feather's touch, if a feather could push 5 grams or 10 or an ounce, which is 28 grams, okay, you could do it, but you also needed to have the range of motion. So in one case, a person with a very high neuromuscular disease, I forget the name of it, but the disease of the horn cells. So it looks like a person with severe muscular dystrophy might be able to use your hands, but not lift your arms up. And your hands are not strong enough to do keyboards or to barely lift a glass. But a glass is heavy compared to an ounce, right? 8 ounces in a glass is 8 times, and the glass weighs 8 ounces maybe, or 6 ounces. So you need about 10 times the amount shown on dice, okay? So if it takes 1 to do it, you really need 10, and 10 is very little because you shake around in the vehicle a lot, potholes. So there has to be stability. And there has to be a reserve. Being technically oriented, I just came up with rules. There was, 1/10 rule of ergonomics. We all know that if you walk, you can walk for miles and miles if you always do it. You don't get tired very quickly. But if you run flat out, you're going to get tired in 10 seconds. So the key to all of this was making sure people had a margin and a reserve to be able to do the controls. Of course, making the controls required understanding them. And that was a study that I got involved in. It captured my attention. I had been through Bio-Pre-Med. I went to automotive school, auto technology university for a little while. And I was a natural at taking things apart and seeing how they work. I also met a gentleman who was, at the time, I'm 25, living up in Boston. I'd moved up there to repair respirators and had an iron lung in my garage for people who had polio that, needed service equipment. So they lived at home rather than a hospital, or maybe they lived at a hospital, but I serviced hardware. And the people who had that hardware, in fact, there was only a few that actually drove with breathing devices. So you may not notice it. They didn't have it attached like Steve Reeves at your neck, but maybe at your belly, it squeezed your belly to help you breathe. Or you could breathe during the day on your own, but at nighttime you needed to use something to help you. Or you breathe with a cigar holder in your mouth. You clamp down on it and fill you up, and that's all you needed. So as long as you could breathe well and you didn't lose control of that, then as long as you actually had the range of motion with your hands or maybe with your arms, different kinds of conditions led to different types of controls. So the shortest way to think of this is it's an evolution. Today, a car can drive by itself because of a combination of sensory devices, computer controls, and electric motors that are strong enough to do the job. So not just myself, but a handful of inventors around the world applied automotive technology, how power steering works, electrohydraulically or simply hydraulically, etc.
Mm-hmm.
You learn how these things work and then see if you could create a match. Can you control it accurately enough to go down the road safely and do what everybody else does?
Right.
So for whatever reason, I had a sense about these things, and I actually had plenty of life experience. At the time, you could fly a plane automatically, but you couldn't land it automatically in 1970. But over time, that became true as well. So for whatever reason, I had a technical mind that looked into the depth of what made things work, including how controls work. And I learned it little by little. And as an entrepreneur, I built the things and actually got it done. So heaven knows, by this time, thousands of people around the country and the world used things I made to be able to drive. And then they weren't all at this high level, but there were dozens at that level. And that, like so often, teaches us, if you could do the really difficult, then the not so bad are a lot easier.
So you got a chance to dive into the most difficult things, I think, because you leaned into that talent, you rebelled, you got away from pre-med, and we were talking right before we went on air, like maybe 3 years as a W-2 guy. So how has that marked your ability to serve, right? Like without going as far as you were able to go, you wouldn't be able to help the people in the special way you were able to. So how is being an entrepreneur, how is that life of leaning your talent, being on the edge and not having that W-2 kind of shape things for you and got you where you are today?
I think that you retrospectively, when you're older, I look at what I did and say, oh my word, was that really a good idea? And overall, yes, I think if you ask the people who I helped, you would say unequivocally, absolutely. But life changes. So people's expectations by the late 90s, people started to become expecting all of these things should exist already that make it easy to do. But in the beginning, the people that sought to do these things were more like the freedom was so important to them. And although government agencies were helpful, it really took individuals who had the money to hire somebody who had talent, who could make something for them to try.
Tell me about engaging these people that just were so burdened by constraint, and tell me about what you maybe felt for their desire to be free.
Well, you're keeping me in early history here, but I could tell you a great story.
Yeah.
And the person who probably contributed to my life most in the way of appreciating other people's lives and working hard to get it. But he had advantage. His father, this man had polio. He's a few years older than me. This year I'll be 70. Okay. So it was a man named Tom Dawson, Judge Tom Dawson, he could move his left hand like this. Now, he couldn't raise it as high, just about get up here, but he can move his left hand. It wasn't strong, and he could swing his arm back and forth, and he could move his right hand a little. And he could feel all of that. So he's not paralyzed from sensation. This man could make love. All of his body could feel. He had polio. It didn't take away your parasympathetic nervous system. Everything you can feel on the outside and all of that, there's not numbness. So it's just a matter of whether you can move things or not. That's very important. Being able to control something with finesse, you got to be able to feel the finesse. So Tom, with his dad, had built a bridge building company, a $100 million company. And Tom went to law school, had a raucous life, and got married, has a daughter. His wife had her own disabilities later in life. And he didn't let anything stop him. He'd get with his friends. They caroused around. I've heard all kinds of stories, but Kentucky, you know, it's about bourbon whiskey. And Tom, I met through a man who was instrumental in launching my career, a marketing fellow, recognized my talent. He was 13 years old, a man named Dale Carpenter, introduced me to Tom. Dale had already been around the country and met a lot of people. His dad was also an engineer and an inventor, invented one of the first wheelchair lifts for vans in the East Coast. So Dale introduced me to Tom. Tom flies out in the company Beechcraft twin engine airplane. I'm familiar with those because my own dad had his own airplane. It's not quite so cheap, so expensive, but he did all right. But those are my dad's planes, not mine. So we were taught, you know, you're not born with a silver spoon here, and you're going to do it on your own. And that turned out to be true. I did. When I told my dad I was leaving college from pre-med and I was going to do automotive technology, he says, excuse my French, if you want to fuck up your life, do it on your own dime.
Well, what about Tom?
Well, Tom learned to invest money. He taught me that, look, if you can't afford to lose it, you can't afford to invest it. Well, Tom invested in what I did, and I had a dozen people who were friends and many of them shareholders in a company by 1987. It was 1983 or 4 that I was introduced to Tom.
Okay.
I had already had a handful of years behind me in working for. I worked for a company in Rhode Island designing things that Dale had introduced me there and said, "Here's a whiz kid. He can make stuff. He can make anything." So I just did. I didn't know I couldn't. I did this stuff, and I made whatever Dale asked for. You like the lift this way? You want that? You want that? Yeah, I could do it. But what really caught my attention was the personal experience of working with very severely disabled people. Wanted to do it. They wanted the freedom, just like you or me. Get in your car, go for a drive to work, all of that stuff. Well, that desire of others, and Tom Dawson particularly, who had become a judge, he was a district court judge. He had to get elected. It wasn't bought. I saw him work hard in his county. I forget the name of it, but it's the Bourbon County. And Bardstown, Kentucky, where is he from? And that man kept a dozen years at least, reelected 3 times at least, and ran the district court in his community. So I observed from him of how his own management of me, I knew that I was a bad investment. My company was a orphan technology. Thousands of people could use it, but nobody could afford it. And it was early. So the government just doesn't dump money on this. Although they help plenty of people go to work and have spent thousands of per individual to help folks go to work. tens of thousands, 20s, 50s by now, between 50 and 100 to help someone go to work became common by the early 90s around the country, every state having different budgets to help people. Well, Tom was one of the people who helped launch it because he paid for it himself. So with his bank accounts and whatever and his investments, in 1984, he probably paid me $30,000 to $50,000 to make things that made it possible for him to drive.
Really?
Yeah. And that wasn't, that was a lot of money back then.
And he was just reaching, hey, I need more, Bob. I need more. Was that the type of engagement you had? Well, Bob, I need some more now. And I'm going to reach in my pocket and I need some more. Because it sounds like this guy, Tom, had built a whole life around, achievement, despite, right? It sounds like
I would say that desire showed more like, not like need, but a joyous desire to live life to the fullest.
Right.
To have the freedoms that others enjoy.
Yeah.
He drove his daughter, who was young, and his wife from home in Kentucky to Asheville. We had his annual meeting in Asheville, and Tom would drive. He's driven all over the East Coast with the freedom he had. So, this later in life, I would say, hey, hurry up. Automated driving. It's better for everybody. It really is.
Yeah.
But
let's go, Elon. You hear that? Bob says
start
go.
somewhere. You had to start somewhere. So Tom and other people like him, he was a great example for me about learning to appreciate that. Look, he didn't spend that money just whimsically, but he invested in our company, my dreams to make these things happen, which was his dream. It was his freedom. So I realized later, spending the extra money as an investor to make sure the company thrived was guaranteeing that Bob was going to be able to keep fixing it for him for years to come. So I kept Tom driving for more than 20 years.
Wow.
Before he hung it up.
Wow.
I forget exactly when it was. It was probably the better part of 30 years. But
you had a direct relationship with him for 20 years. You were the direct connection to his driving freedom.
Yes, not entirely. I had friends who could help him. He lived in Kentucky. I lived in Boston. But
gotcha. But your
Tom's
network
was so high level.
Yeah.
That you make something very unusual. It doesn't fit.
Exactly. It's for Tom. It's for Tom.
So and teaching others to take care of it wasn't practical.
And I saw that with other projects, right? I mean, that's the thing. You've reached out there to the very complex things, and it's, we'll have you on for other shows to talk about some of the other projects. But
just figure, take Tom and multiply Tom times 10 or 20. Yeah. I have relationships like that with many people, and that taught me a lot. But it also taught me that you had to make things that were simpler, that were more universal, that could be applied, that could be taught, that could be reduced to a technology rather than a custom application that everybody's different.
So your lessons...
That was difficult for me to learn.
Well, the lessons come the hard way, right? I was just, nice segue, right? So, and as you learn them, it's important that you pass them down, right? And that's part of sharing your talents. And I know you've done a good bit of that. So how has the ability to not just establish these talents, practice them in a meaningful way through a meaningful career, how has your ability to pass that down and share your talents, not just with the people that are direct recipients, but the people who flourish with their own talents because of you and what you've shown them? Do you have any individuals, any specific stories, or how does that kind of relate to you?
I would say that, let's say, folks like Tom and other very influential folks in my life who did a lot with either the help they received from state agencies or family, or by fate had the resources to get it done.
Mhm.
Now, Tom was probably had the most help from money from family history. Others were, had professional families who was a big stretch to help them.
Mhm.
And some were lucky enough to have government help, and it was enough. But then went on to do very fantastic things with their lives. So when I confronted difficult times in my own life, how do I get across it? And I look at their life and say, look, it's true. There's always someone with a more difficult situation. How can you look at that and find inspiration in your own, or the pettiness in your own peeves?
Mhm.
And that's, in many respects, the more successful you are, the more potentially selfish you become, and expect that your goals are some of the best goals. You're the ones that should exist because you're making them. It makes you arrogant, or susceptible to becoming arrogant, in a sense, the more successful you are. Just like it's well known today, if you become very wealthy, you naturally learn something about protecting your wealth, and you don't want to lose it. Unfortunately, it can make you callous and forget what it's like to not have. All of these things wrap together in the philosophy of life that you develop. I've always been an idealist, and it hurt me. It hurt a lot.
What do you mean an
Be an
idolist?
idealist.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It made me turn the other cheek when I should have known better about people's not so honest inclinations. It's archetypal. I'm a classic inventor, and I look for the good goal
Mhm.
and the good in others. I've taught this.
Mhm.
And I learned by other not so good thinking to look the other way, or to see myself small in certain regards, that I needed somebody else's money to make things happen. I was always struggling to get enough money. I raised $500,000 for your business. I spent $1 million of money I earned developing products. No exaggeration.
Yeah.
And I earned millions. I didn't get to keep them all. And learning how to keep enough and how to take care of yourself and your family along the road to having big goals, well, it's not automatic. So
Did you ever find that serving?
I had the great gift of seeing the help that you
Yeah.
are giving to others with your talent,
Okay.
and it's personal.
Yes.
Okay. Anyone who's worked in this industry and helped people have their freedom, you know it. You know you earned it. It's not you earned it. You know that you're helping them, and then you see it. So you don't have a question. That helps motivate you go forward. Realize that's a valuable thing. For me, I believe that people who had disabilities having their freedom to travel around in life like any of us actually meant a lot. When you were born or I was a young man, most people were very uncomfortable speaking with anyone who had a severe disability. You just didn't know how to do it. Why would you? If you didn't meet them, how would you know? So most people were really quite awkward. And over time, that led to the Americans with Disabilities Act of the early 90s, because that awkwardness actually was a social problem for our country. Well, at that time, I believed I was helping unwind that problem by making it possible for people with very severe disabilities to be visible in life, drive here and there, all of that. So helping that was great for me. It was great for my ego. It was great for their freedom. I think it was great for the country, really.
Yeah.
But it hurt. It hurt because I got my ass
Well,
kicked routinely
yeah,
by
it's
business
part of it.
people, by business errors, by
Yeah.
mistakes in judgment, by arrogance, by all the kinds of things that come with being an entrepreneur. You can't learn them fast enough. If you were gifted in a good balance, being a Libra, of all these things, rather than believing you have it because you're so arrogant and successful, you don't. It's very hard to see your own disabilities and blind spots. My blind spots hurt my family, my relationship with my wife, who was very tolerant, and my kids didn't have maybe the time with them that I would have liked to give them. So heaven knows. I think I'm satisfied. They have good educations. For however tough their life was, they wouldn't give it back what they received. And to me, that's a little bit of a ticket of freedom as a beginning of being an elder adult, was to know my children, who range from 30 to 37, I guess, at the end of this year.
Yeah.
And I have 2 older stepsons, all of them fabulous people. And I know my own children and my stepsons, my wife very well. None of them would give back what they learned in life, however they acquired it.
Yeah. And
so
listen,
educations.
Bob, and listen, you've accumulated a lot of knowledge. You've shared a lot of it back down. Just real quick, unfortunately,
we're already using up the time, right?
But I do want to listen, Bob, at 70, I know you got a long-term plan. I don't want you to give me the long answer, right? I know you got big things ahead of you. So just listen, your talent is fixing things. Thanks for sharing everything that you've shared with us today. Just tell us real quick, what are you doing over the next year or so that's exciting? What are you building? What are you working on? Wrap it up with just a quick snapshot into what's exciting for you and your talents over the next
okay,
year or so.
I made a bendy bar for you, right?
Okay,
well,
yeah.
My brother and I created the Bendy Fit company. It's nascent.
Okay.
For a couple of years, several years now, as you know, I've been developing an exercise product.
Yep.
The utility patent and design patents are being filed final next month.
Very nice.
It's big. It's a lot more work than one would expect. To me, a hell of a lot simpler than solving the driving problems. But making a product successful, it takes all the entrepreneurial things and a pile of money and a money risk. So, spending $300,000 to $500,000 to get to the point that it needs to go, just to be at a real beginning. Okay. So the Bendy Bar is hatching over the next year. With little luck, we'll actually have very good quality patents and afford to defend them, sell the product into larger companies that can afford to make use of honest to goodness, real good patent work.
Yep.
So that's the Bendy Bar project. Taken an interest in crypto in the past year, doing reasonably okay with that. Hopefully not getting my ass kicked. But
I think you're safe.
I've learned some things about it. It's very interesting that I'm working on a plan that is meant to apply the DeFi concept, the decentralized finance. Well, not decentralized everything, but they're giant companies are centralized.
We're gonna have to save DeFi.
Decentralized companies, small ones. So I believe that there's an opportunity today. To take what is happening with crypto that's little known in the fundraising area, marry together crypto with what we do know something about, crowdfunding. 10 years. Marry this together with funding at the SBA and community level to design, streamline factories that actually create jobs, that nurture entrepreneurship, that are supported by maker spaces that have serious goals in the STEM area, which is science and technology, engineering, and mathematics, the big educational part. 3 billion people around the planet are coming into the workforce over the next 10 years and getting educated through their cell phones and other devices. Americans aren't going to make it on low-income factory jobs because there'll always be new people to replace that. Americans have to stay and reinvest in a good combination of studiousness, however you learn it, change our educational methods, respect the jobs that are in between, and create environments where everyone's skills and talents get rewarded fairly.
Yes.
Without rebellion.
It's got to happen because rebellion will happen. Yeah, these things are untenable, right? There's, basic reward structures, basic competency requirements that people, have to check the box on as they're
make it
making their way through this journey,
things.
Right? Yeah, exactly. And I hear you 100%, Bob. The bendy bar, I know the crypto. It sounds interesting. We're gonna have to talk about DeFi over a cup of tea sometime soon.
Applying DeFi to the future.
Yeah, and then and it sounds like you're delving into the talent economy, whether you know it or not. I believe as you do that the power is at everybody's fingertips, and decentralization to do the things that you like to do, which are probably your talents and your passions, right? So people more than ever have the ability.
The toughest thing is keeping that passion going. So I'll sign off with that. At about 70 years old, Joe, you wrestle with have I got it? I think that doesn't matter which president you like. They're both older than me. Okay. And, credit everybody's best intentions. It takes more than recognizing how important it is. You have to get up out of bed and find the joy in it rather than what might be programmed into so many of us, which is earn your freedom and retire. It's expected. Society expects you to be retired. It pushes you away. And it's not healthy. It makes you susceptible to degradation and getting older too fast. You're going to happen anyway. So wrestling with a society where your irrelevance is inevitable, living life as a good example is very important. Right. It's important for your own personal mental survival, but it's more important for all of our survival, because if we don't have good examples, what will you do?
Bob, that's why I wanted to have you on today and introduce you to the world. God willing, the message will touch many, many people, because I think it is worth sharing. I think, Bob, you're important, right? So everybody, you heard Bob right there. What he said was get out there and do something that's meaningful to you. And more importantly, if you don't know what to do, just go share something of yourself with somebody and just keep doing that. And your talents will pop out. Guys, everybody, I hope you
15 seconds.
15 seconds, Bob. Wrap it up for us, and we'll take
Talent
it away.
Is wonderful, Joe, but nobody lives in a vacuum.
That's right.
Okay, there are 100 people who worked side by side with me, who helped what I did, who believed in me. 1,000 people. I don't know how many. I could only have taken them for granted. Now, where I did well, great. Where I didn't do so well, by dear friends of mine, I wish I could take it back. I wish I could have been wiser. Yes. There are regrettable things you do in life, and most people you meet that says, I have no regrets, they're full of shit. They ought to figure them out. If they've been successful, you've probably done regrettable things. Figure out what they are and do a better job. So to the friends who have helped me and to the friends I've hurt, I apologize. I wish I could have done better.
And there's a lesson, people. Keep your ears open, because it's not just about sharing your talents. It's about receiving others when it's appropriate. And that's probably more times than not. So, Bob, thanks a lot. We have some other remarkable people coming on this week. Tonight, we'll be talking to Jason Hinkle, owner of Ideal Brew, on the Talent Show around 9 p.m. And then Thursday, we're going to have Jocelyn Gentry, owner of Gentry Sports Horses. And next Thursday, Brian Schaffert. Brian is a charter pilot. He works for a private company, and his story is pretty amazing. So, Bob, thanks for sharing your story, and we'll go ahead and sign off. I'm going to find you for coffee sooner or later to talk about DeFi.
Regards to your family. Kisses all around. Thanks, Joe.
Kisses.
Peace.
Yeah. Bye-bye.